And these projects are covered in prayer from the very first time we even hear about where we're going, often a year before the project starts, until well after the project is finished. When things are covered in prayer, the Lord is able to work, and the Lord just continues to work through us and in us.
Welcome back to another episode of On the Ground with Samaritan's Purse, where we take you to the front lines and behind the scenes of our work around the world. I'm your host, Christy Graham, and today we're taking you behind the scenes on one of our projects that is very unique, building churches in Alaska. Years ago, Franklin Graham saw a need in Alaska, specifically with these native villages. Just to give you an idea of how remote these areas are, there are 250 villages in Alaska that are completely unreached. To access these places, you need to take a boat or plane. There are no roads going in or out, and so many of them are unreached and untouched. And so every year, Samaritan's Purse builds brand new churches in remote Alaska. And you're going to hear from some of these team members today who work on these projects year-round. And I love this project. It is truly living out Matthew 28, when Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, "All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I've commanded you. And lo, I am with you always to the end of the age." And so these church projects, they're truly the Great Commission. We are working with local churches to help build churches and to equip their communities to share the gospel, to disciple and baptize. And so I hope this episode today encourages you that you don't have to go to remote Alaska or even go on a missions trip to live out the Great Commission. You should and you can do this wherever you are. Psalm 96:3 says, "Declare his works among the nations, his marvelous works among the peoples." And so this includes people in your sphere of influence and in native Alaska. If you live in a small town, a big city, if you travel, if you don't, there are people around you that need to hear about Jesus Christ. And so I hope this episode encourages you to be bold with the gospel. First, I want you to hear from Corey Lynch. He is the Director of North American Ministry Projects in Alaska. I talked to Corey while most of our recent church build in Mekoryuk was finishing up.
Previously, in my former life, I was an athlete, and but being an athlete, I always loved building. I always loved being able to solve a problem or solutions to problems. And so when I transitioned out of being an athlete to trying to figure out what God's plan for my life was, I had this opportunity presented to start doing church builds. And yeah, it's fun to figure out logistics. We say it's just trying to get the ship, the sails up, the ship packed, and get it on the ocean to start sailing. It's an incredibly hard job. And this year, we've set sail on the church build, and we've really had generally easy waters. And I think that God gives us all talents and skills, and how do we use them for His glory? That's what we all have to ask ourselves every day that we wake up is, one day we're going to stop breathing, one day our heart's going to stop pumping, and what have we done for God's kingdom while we had this chance on earth? And what are your talents? What are you good at? It's been a fun ride. It's been, I think maybe eight church builds so far. Yeah, so it's been a wild ride, and every year you're like, okay, we know all the tricks in the book, and then here goes another year in Mekoryuk where the whole foundation is wrong, and we're grinding foundation pads for hours and hours and hours. So there's always surprises in Alaska, but that's kind of part of the fun that keeps you going.
Corey is my brother-in-law, and I love that he is using his gifts and talents for God's glory. God gave him specific skill sets and interests, and his attention to detail is so helpful in these projects. And it's clear that he enjoys the work, the problem solving that comes with building in such remote areas. You'll get to hear more from Corey later, but I also want you to hear from Kristin. She is the Regional Program Manager for North American Ministries Alaska Projects. And for the last couple of years, she's had the privilege of going out and living in these native villages. working with our team to build churches, but also building relationships with the communities and seeing God's work in these remote villages.
I am in Alaska and currently in the town of Soldotna. I started out in Samaritan's Purse by doing disaster relief in the lower 48 and loved it. Such great ministry opportunities, but we were only able to really meet with the homeowners and to be with them for a short amount of time. And so it's very different up here in Alaska, where we get to live among the people that we are serving and ministering to. And you're right, it's so much easier than to build deeper relationships. And so the gospel that we are sharing, we get to live out from day to day, and they see that. And we are able to, really delve into the hurts and pains of the people in many of these villages.
This ministry is amazing because our staff and volunteers, they get to live amongst the people. They get to build relationships because they're there for many months. And here's Corey talking more about where we built a church this past summer.
The place we're building this year is about a 4-hour plane flight straight to the west over the ocean and on this island that 300 to 400 people live on. And this is an Eskimo island where they've been living for generations, and it's out in the middle of nowhere.
I love that, all of our work, Samaritan's Purse, we're based on the Good Samaritan, and that was started with a physical, helping of, carrying the man, bandaging his wounds, taking him to the end. But, it ended with the most important of him paying that debt, paying his debt and saying, I'll come back. Yeah. And that's all the work that we do is to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And as you mentioned, we are working with the local church there. But how have you watched or have there been people impacted for the gospel because of this church build? How have you seen the spiritual impact of this physical church being built?
Yeah, so last year we built a church in Mekoryuk, which was a phenomenal church. The guys did a great job building it. They went from about 4,000 to 5,000 gallons of diesel a year of heating. That's what they heat with diesel, to about 600. So just right there, we were able to save the church, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next 100 years, just by, building this structure. And then you see church attendance, it goes way up. It doesn't matter what culture you live in. A 70-year-old old lady that's walking to church when it's negative 20 degrees doesn't want to go and sit in a church that's 40 degrees. No. I mean, that's human nature. So you see church attendance just skyrocket. It's usually triple to quadruple what it has been in the years, just because of comfort, right? So you see that every year, and that's one of the things we're really excited about, to be able to build a very energy efficient and state-of-the-art church that where it'll last a long time in the middle of nowhere. And that you can see how the gospel will continue on through those four walls, based on how you build. And that's we tell our volunteers that, and we tell our staff that is, we're not building for speed here. We can build fast. It's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to build for longevity. And so how do we build this building for 100, 200 years?
And that's why a lot of times these villages, the church then becomes the central location of their community. And something I do want to talk about, the church, it's not just a building. I mean, yes, it helps to have a church to meet in, but you guys find communities and pastors that are being the church before the building's built. Yeah. So talk to me about the heart of the people that we go to serve, and how do you even find these locations to then say, we want to help you build a church?
So the church really is the center of the city, or if the city is what you want to call it. It's a village, usually, anywhere from 300 to 1,000 people usually. And so that becomes the center of their society, and that's where you get married. That's where you have your Easter programs. That's where you have church. That's where you have funerals. And to see some of the places, like last year we built a church in Mekoryuk, to see their church, it was literally just falling to the ground. And so they didn't have a city center anymore that they could congregate. My heart is to give a building that's an incredible place to come and be comfortable. And obviously the goal is to bring the gospel closer to people's hearts, whether they're Christians or not. and to get inside of a city and to change the city from a building perspective. It's a way to keep the gospel presented for a long time.
The goal of this project is longevity. Longevity of the church building something that can last, but more importantly, longevity spiritually, as they make disciples in these villages and make an eternal impact. And in Mekoryuk, people came to know Jesus Christ. In my conversation with Kristin, I asked her how the people of Mekoryuk changed her life personally.
One of my greatest joys of being out there this past summer is a girl named Lisa. She was born with hydrocephalus, and she's in her 40s now, but has endured a lot of developmental delays. But she has a heart of joy that only the Lord could provide. She loves the Lord with all of her being, loves to encourage others, even though she has not had an easy life. And so she was an encouragement to me and to every one of our volunteers that went out there. And so she's just one example of how the Lord is using this ministry to impact me and encourage me in my own walk with him.
Yeah, and it sounds like life is hard there. They have circumstances and challenges, yet the church, the believers are alive.
Yes, that is very much true, Christy. I saw that in the worship services, how getting together every week to worship God with them was such a joy. But in their services, especially in the evenings, pretty much the entire community will get up. It lasts like 3 hours, this service, because everybody gets up and shares how God is at work throughout their life and sings a song of praise to him. So yeah, it was very encouraging to be there, even challenging to my own faith and in a really good way. So some very strong believers there. There is also a lot of darkness in these villages, but God is working.
You worked in disaster relief, and so you know firsthand. I mean, Samaritan's Purse, we help people physically, obviously, after a crisis or disaster. But the reason we go is the gospel, the spiritual. We want to go to bring the hope of the gospel, and our main goal is spiritual. So can you talk about what it was like for them to receive physical help, yes, of a church, but how did that impact them spiritually?
Many of the leaders in the village encouraged us by letting us know that there were more people coming to services than ever before to come and worship, or even just to come out of curiosity to hear more about the gospel, about the truth of God. And so, by us being there and having volunteers go out into the village, that also brought people together. And prayer is such a huge part of what we do as a ministry. Prayer is ministry really throughout all of Samaritan's Purse. And these projects are covered in prayer from the very first time we even hear about where we're going, often a year before the project starts, until well after the project is finished. When things are covered in prayer, the Lord is able to work, and the Lord just continues to work through us and in us.
And none of this is possible without prayer. Later on, you'll learn more about specific ways that you can pray for this project and the people in these villages. But I wanted Corey to share about how these remote places, how complicated they are to get supplies and equipment in. And sometimes we can't do it in our own strength. The Lord has to move mountains. And the team works year-round on this project, ordering and preparing for the next build.
We knew that we were going to build in Mekoryuk, which is on Nunavak Island. So it's an island situation where you have mostly your ground that you're going to build on, your foundation, is going to be tundra and pretty much just muck. And so we knew that we wanted to build on a better foundation because it was a low-lying piece of land that the church had bought. And so we determined that we would definitely need a dump truck because there's just no way to get the material in that we needed, and it was hundreds of dump truck loads of sand. So the problem is there's no dump truck. So we shipped it to Anchorage, and then we shipped it directly to the island. But in order to get to the island, it has to go through a town called Bethel, which is in a freshwater river. Well, that river was it was still frozen because the saltwater doesn't freeze in the ocean where they're going, so they have to wait to get to Bethel. So you have that equipment, and you have the dump truck coming at the same time, and all of our materials from Seattle, from Washington, from all over the country, and from Anchorage that have got shipped in, and we're trying to get them all on one shallow water landing craft that can go in to Mekoryuk. And so there's just so much logistics there, and so the dump truck made it, and we were able to finally get the sand that we needed off the beach. And it's just a laborious process, but that all starts a year prior to figuring out what do we need. And so the cool thing too is that Samaritan's Purse is gifting that dump truck to the village, and so they'll be able to use that for their future needs and building houses or whatever they're going to do. So the logistics is extremely difficult. And fortunate for me, I have 3 people that work with me: Russ Richardson and Spence Holman and Kristin Holman, and they're incredible. We're a well-oiled machine. We work well together as a team, and so just everyone's thoughts and brains together, we tend to figure things out. And we have some great volunteers that come up and volunteer with us also. So just a great team, and then God leads the way, and you just figure out how to get stuff done.
I'm so thankful for this team and the unity as they work so well together. They keep the mission at the forefront all year round. And I talked with Corey about how he has changed personally while working on this project, and how the people that he has met over the years has impacted him and what God has taught him.
This is a culture where we're building this year that not too long ago, they lived underground. So they didn't even have houses. So they built their houses like a beaver would build their house. So you have to go underground and then come back up into a sod hut. And so they would trap their heat inside of these houses underground. So this community is, they're on Nunivak Island. The island's 70 miles wide. They have no trees. They have no bears. They have no apex predators. All they have is reindeer, which they herd like cows, and they eat them. And it's a seagoing community. They're always on the ocean because they're surrounded by the ocean. And they have one little freshwater river that runs through so they're able to get their salmon in the freshwater. The city is right on the ocean, so you have ocean views almost every day. A lot of rainy days, a lot of windy days. You're right on the Bering Sea. So if you look out to the west, there's, the next landmass is Russia. So the community is a really engaging and loving community. They're very welcoming. The weather is very fierce. You're in the middle of the Bering Sea, so the only way on and off the island is by plane. And they've been there for a long time. And they're a little bit different than the cultures that are inland because they've had to be so isolated. But faith-wise, to see these cultures, not too long ago, they had never heard the name of Jesus. They first heard the gospel around 1930s, and the gentleman I was talking to, Tom, he remembers it being a little boy and someone bringing a Bible in and presenting the gospel to his parents, and just really sweet story that his dad, he basically said, this is what our culture's been looking for this whole time. This is what we've needed. And he said, now that I've heard these words, I don't need bread anymore. I don't need water anymore. These words of Jesus Christ will strengthen me the rest of my days and the rest of my life. And he learned how to read the Bible, and then they had the Bible translated into their language. They still speak their language there, which is Inupiaq. And a lot of places in Alaska, they're not speaking their language anymore. So the new generation is just forgetting the language. So there, if you go to church there, at the Covenant Church, they sing in their own language. But it's an amazing community, and it's to the ends of the earth, no doubt about it. It's a long ways out there, but you can see when your feet are on the ground there just how the gospel has really changed their hearts and minds and lives in the last 100 years.
I'm thankful that believers got out of their comfort zones and they chose to boldly serve and share the gospel in a place that had never been reached before. And this is why people like Tom were able to place their hope in Jesus Christ years later. And the multiplication continues. Here's more of my conversation with Kristin. It's so unique what you get to do. I mean, you get to go be a missionary for a season, which I'm sure is hard to know. I'm not going to live here forever. You know, you want to be invested and get to know them, but you know you're going to leave. And so I was going to ask, how do you keep doing this? Because that's hard, and you sacrifice and you live in, you know, difficult conditions and give away a piece of your heart. But that's really what we should all do. I mean, we're all sojourners and, you know, passing through on this earth. How does the Lord sustain you and keep you doing this hard work?
Yeah, you know, Christy, I think the Lord just opens up another portion of your heart that you didn't even know you had. And there are certain people that He really just allows connections to be made with. And yeah, it's such a joy, really. And so, yes, it's hard living conditions, not always ideal. But again, so worth it because of the work that we get to see Him doing.
It's incredible. And I guess, how can we be praying, you know, for future construction? Because you're not there building right now, but so much preparation and plans are being made right now. It's kind of a year-round project. So how can we be praying for the next church that will be built and the past churches, the congregants and the people that you got to know? So I guess, how can we be praying for this project?
Yeah. So I mentioned that there is a lot of darkness within Alaska. Obviously, it's wintertime. We only have a few hours of daylight. It's completely dark right now, even as we're talking, Christy. So there's a lot of physical darkness, but there's a lot of spiritual darkness as well, with the isolation and the physical darkness. Yeah, I would say that there's just a high rate of depression, a high rate of abuse, and alcohol or drug use, and even suicides related to that hopelessness in so many of these places in Alaska. And so pray that the Lord continues to use us and other ministries to reach into those dark places, and be able to share His light, to share His hope. There's just a few verses that I would love to share with you. John 8, verse 12, when Jesus spoke again to the people, He said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." And then further down in John, in chapter 12, verse 35 and 36, Jesus was speaking to the crowd, and this was actually when He was telling of His own death. He was going through His own darkness. In fact, in John verse 27, it says, "Now is my soul troubled," because He was thinking about His impending death. And so in speaking to the crowd, He said, "You are going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light before darkness overtakes you. Whoever walks in the dark does not know where they are going. Believe in the light while you have the light, so you may become children of light." And then a little while later, in that same chapter, He says, "I have come into the world as a light so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness." And that's truly the crux of the gospel. The Lord, Jesus came to bring light, to bring hope to the darkness. And the darkness can't overcome the hope of the light of Christ. And so pray for that light to enter into the lives of so many of these people who are dealing with depression and isolation and, abuses, and even those who know of people and have loved ones who have died by suicide, because that's a real issue out here in Alaska. So pray for that as well.
Thank you for joining us today. Please be praying for our Alaska projects, as they are a yearly project, and be praying for the things that Kristin shared in this episode. God is the one who builds these churches, and we can play a pivotal role as we pray for the logistics and details and the hearts of the people that we serve. But you can also boldly proclaim the gospel in your daily life. But if you feel like God is calling you to serve, maybe you've never heard of these projects before, I encourage you to go to our website, SamaritansPurse.org, and see how you can volunteer. Or if you know someone that is handy or might be interested in signing up during next summer's build in Alaska, check out spvolunteer.org for volunteer opportunities. You'll get to spend a week serving, working hard, and sharing the hope of the gospel. We're so thankful for our volunteers, and we could not do this work with Samaritan's Purse without them. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for serving and praying. God bless you.